Hi, everyone. My name is David Fitzgerald, and I am the Veterans Outreach Director at Concerned Veterans for America. And I was part of a very gifted team that put together this 5K that you guys participated in this past weekend. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you for your participation. Thank you for all the fantastic photos and videos you sent in. I saw some pretty quick run times in there as well. It's very appreciated. The cause that we're trying to support, bringing our troops home from Afghanistan, ending our endless wars, it's definitely worth that moment of your time to go out there, to do it, to talk to another community member about it. So thank you for taking that additional step and spending your afternoon with us today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of Concerned Veterans for America, Mr. Nate Anderson.
Thanks, David. Thanks so much. Thank you, everybody, who's tuning in with us today. Like David said, we've just really enjoyed seeing all of the social media posts and run times and photos of folks running with loved ones and kids. It's humbling, and I just want to thank everybody who did participate in our 5K to end endless wars. Thank you for posting. Also, thanks for sharing that with your loved ones and friends on social media. It really helps us get the word out and elevate this important issue that we wanted to discuss. So thank you so much.
So Nate, would you like to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what your background in the military was?
Yeah, happy to. So let me tell you a little bit about my story and really about Concerned Veterans for America. I kind of want to do both here. So to answer your question, I'm an Army vet. I know we've got a lot of veterans probably on the line today, and I'm a veteran of the post 9/11 conflict. I enlisted in 2004. The attacks of September 11th of 2001 were a very influential driving force, I think, behind my desire to serve, and a lot of my classmates also. And since then, I've spent my military career in special operations as a Green Beret, and I eventually became a warrant officer in the Army also. And I love the military. I've loved serving. I love the camaraderie. I love that sense of mission. And yeah, there's good times and there's not so good times, like anything. The military is no exception there. But I mean, I think that military service is very rewarding, and it was for me, and I'm very proud of it. So when I got out of active duty, I lost that sense of connection. Probably not alone. I think it's a pretty common thing for separating service members. I missed it, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. So eventually, I was introduced to this group, this organization that was called Concerned Veterans for America. And there were a few things that really stood out about this organization. First, CVA, Concerned Veterans for America, really gets stuff done. And I just love that about what I saw. I think, frankly, it's because of the people who make up the organization. I'm talking about military families and veterans, and that group of people, I tell you, knows how to get stuff done. They buckle down and they work hard and they get stuff done. And that really stood out. So CVA, we build effective coalitions. We influence lawmakers. We drive policy change that can literally lead to the passage of laws. And that kind of team was something that I really wanted to be a part of. It immediately drew me to what CVA was doing. That's number one. Secondly, though, Concerned Veterans for America offers an opportunity of what I like to call a new mission. I always tell people who I speak to about CVA for the first time that we're like a new assignment if you're in the military, but we're a new assignment for people who have hung up the uniform and who want to continue to serve the country. And I think that there's a lot of us out there who have that desire and motivation, and who are maybe looking for that still. And so our mission is a very important one. We advocate for policies that preserve freedom and preserve prosperity in America. And those are things that we and our families have sacrificed for. And we often like to say that vets and their families have a unique relationship to these freedoms that we really enjoy in America. And I am convinced it's because we all have some skin in the game. We've given up much of our young lives in service. We've been apart from loved ones overseas. We've lost loved ones in war. And even after war, we've lost loved ones to the struggle that comes after war too often. And so Americans really do understand that sacrifice that comes with service. And the institution of the military is consistently among the most trusted institutions in our society. So when we raise our voices and when we advocate for things, people listen. And so we're building a movement, really, and we're standing for these policies that preserve the ideals that a lot of men and women in uniform have given their lives for. And in doing so, we're giving the veteran community and the military family community a chance to have their voices heard. So that's who CVA is. That's what really drew me to this organization years ago. Love to be a part of it. And I firmly believe that that's what makes us also an effective organization.
So Nate, either drawing on your experience as a Green Beret or more broadly as Concerned Veteran for America's stance, how do you guys feel about the seemingly endless wars in Afghanistan?
Well, I think that to discuss why ending this conflict is important, we have to go back. We've got to go back in time to discover why there is a conflict in the first place. And I think that's probably the best way for us to talk about why we're where we are. So rewind the clock back to September 11, 2001. America was attacked at home and on our soil, and nearly 3,000 people were killed in a single day on 9/11. And our nation needed to respond, and we did respond, and we were absolutely justified in our response. And so in October, early October of that year, just a few weeks later, we launched Operation Enduring Freedom. And this was 19 years ago now. So I'm sure a lot of us can remember where we were on the attacks and when we started to hear news reports of this operation in Afghanistan. So we launched Operation Enduring Freedom, and we began these military operations in the country where the organization responsible for 9/11 attacks, Al-Qaeda, was operating. And we had a short list of objectives, really three main objectives in Afghanistan as we went in. Number one, we aimed to uproot Al-Qaeda in the country. They were our main enemy here in this operation. They had attacked us. They had orchestrated these attacks, and they were going to experience the repercussions of those attacks. That was number one. Secondly, we aimed to punish the Taliban for harboring Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. The Taliban, distinctly separate group from Al-Qaeda, but they had protected bin Laden and his operation in the country, and we were going to deliver some retribution for that also. So that was the Taliban. And then finally, we wanted to kill Osama bin Laden. He was public enemy number one, and ultimately he was responsible for those attacks on 9/11, and not just for those attacks, but for many other attacks, terrorist attacks around the world. And the United States wanted him dead. So if you recall those early days of Operation Enduring Freedom, so long ago now, the U.S. Air Force, guided by the CIA and some special operators on the ground, absolutely decimated these enemy strongholds across Afghanistan. And when we look back, we accomplished those first two objectives relatively early in the war. It was a highly successful operation in that sense. The core of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan was pretty much destroyed, and the remainder of the Al-Qaeda members in country were just being hunted down. The Taliban had been driven basically into the mountains, and a new Afghan government was being established. And the only remaining objective really was bin Laden. He escaped initially, And by all accounts, he fled relatively to the relative safety of Pakistan pretty early on. And of course, he was later killed in Abbottabad during that operation launched from across the border. So we got to ask, right? If we accomplished what we aimed to accomplish pretty early on in this war, then why are we still there? Why have Americans continued to deploy and fight and die if we already met those initial criteria for mission success? And the answer to that is that the United States gave into a sort of mission creep. We policymakers really on both parties on the Republican and Democratic side, multiple presidential administrations gave into these temptations to expand the scope of our operations in Afghanistan. And very, very rapidly, the mission changed from one thing, driving out Al-Qaeda or toppling the Taliban, to something very different, nation building. And nation building is something that the US has demonstrated a very poor track record of, especially in recent decades. It's tremendously expensive. It's highly susceptible to insurgencies, and it's difficult to divest from those engagements once you're committed to them. And unfortunately, the results in Afghanistan is a virtually unwinnable conflict now, with no easy way out. And that's what we've gotten from this mission creep and nation building. And so that's why we're still there 19 years later, after the attacks of 9/11. So our nation's dealing with some pretty significant problems of this policy over the last 18, 19 years now. And I just want to highlight a couple of those because I think that they're worth talking through. First off, military problems. The military problem. It's this prolonged ground engagement in countries like Afghanistan. They really bog down a large amount of resources, and they require tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of troops and civilians, significant logistical support, tremendous amount of strategic assets, also like air power or naval power to support. And these are very limited resources, even for a nation like the United States, who is relatively wealthy and well equipped in our military. We still have limited resources. And then committing them to a country like Afghanistan, which if we're honest, doesn't significantly contribute to our national interest, that means that we're less equipped to address some bigger and much more pressing threats to the security and prosperity of the United States. So that's a military problem. Constitutionally, we've got some issues here. So the intended checks and balances between Congress and the executive branch that our forefathers built into the Constitution, those are currently failing to provide any check or any balance the way things are right now. One example of this is the misuse of the 2001 authorization for use of military force, or AUMF as it's often referred to in politics. This document was passed immediately after 9/11 to authorize the military action in Afghanistan that we launched. It's sort of a modern day declaration of war of sorts that only Congress has the power to do. That's what the AUMF was. But this document that's still around, still in use, has been used by multiple presidents to justify military action all over the world, well outside its original intent. And now that intended separation of powers between the executive and the Congress, it's weaker than it's ever been. So that's a significant constitutional problem that we've created for ourselves. Fiscally, the war on terror is like this financial black hole. Afghanistan alone, we've been spending about $45 billion every single year. That's your money. That's my money. That's money that we can't use domestically during one of the biggest financial crises of our time. And in the meantime, the federal government's practically working overtime to spend this money that we don't have. And our national debt in and of itself is becoming a serious threat to our national security. And these wars only contribute to that. So that's a pretty significant problem on the financial side. And then finally, but not least importantly, by any stretch, this is a serious ethical problem. 2,400 American service members have lost their lives, and that's just in Afghanistan. Our all-volunteer military force is this tiny, tiny sliver of our population in our country, and it is fighting the longest war in our nation's history. And it continues to fight. They continue to be deployed with virtually no end in sight. And the military community has just been carrying this weight of this war. And it seems like America has really just left those families behind, that military community behind, as this war has progressed for so long. And that's a significant ethical problem for our country. And so, recently there's been a tremendous amount of discussion about bringing our troops home. And the Trump administration is one of the biggest proponents of ending this conflict, which is a great thing. It's a very good thing. And I like to sum this up in really two main themes of why this is a good thing. So first off, I mentioned the financial, the military problems. Bringing our troops back from Afghanistan is a good strategic decision for the United States. There are real threats around the world, and we should take those threats seriously. But I can tell you that Afghanistan does not pose any existential threat to our nation, to America. We accomplished what we originally set out to do a pretty long time ago, and we continue to pour resources into the country nonetheless. All summer, Congress has been debating coronavirus relief packages. The economic recovery that our country is going through is not going to be cheap. And if we continue to pour these resources into failed nation-building efforts, then those are resources that are not going to be able to go to helping our country battle the health or economic effects of this pandemic. And the same goes for the real threats that are out there. Every asset that's bogged down in Afghanistan is something that we're unable to respond with to an actual threat to our safety. And so we have an opportunity for this country, for America, to focus on American interests by ending these wars. And that makes it a good strategic decision for the United States. And quickly, the second point is that just as important, this is a good moral decision. And I touched on it earlier. We're fighting the longest war in American history. Thousands of lives have been lost, thousands of Americans, and so many more have been seriously wounded as a result of these conflicts. But by keeping our service members in that country, we're putting them unnecessarily in harm's way. And we're putting their families unnecessarily through hardship here at home. Any military family member you ask about what a deployment is like without their loved one will tell you what it's like. And it's not something that's pleasant. And unfortunately, it seems like American society has moved on, despite the fact that our service members are still deploying, still fighting. And make no mistake, the military is going to do what it needs to do to defend the United States. Every service member will do their duty there. But if being there doesn't serve our vital national interest, what kind of message does that send to those individuals on the value we place on their lives? It's not a positive one. So when you add up these military problems, these constitutional problems, these fiscal problems, and then the ethical and moral problems that we've created during the course of this 20-year conflict, leaving Afghanistan is a very reasonable and responsible decision for our country.
So Nate, I would like to restate quickly a few of those top line points I think that we saw in there. Obviously, we accomplished, now looking back from the perspective of 2020, we accomplished all of our original objectives. Osama bin Laden is dead. We severely punished the Taliban. We rooted Al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan back then and have mostly suppressed their activity since then in Afghanistan. There are huge military repercussions of this. A lot of fighter jet equipment is very expensive to maintain, and we have worn through a lot of our stock while we have been fighting in Afghanistan. A lot of our helicopters have incurred damage from the sand. So it's wearing away at our military state of readiness. The perpetual deployments have worn away at our family morale. They have kept our families separate. They have contributed a massive amount of Purple Hearts to the world. The psychological repercussions, those who do not commit suicide do still carry the troubles of what they've seen because of the global war on terror with them for the rest of their lives. There's the moral questions of, is it better for that country for us to be there? There's the moral question of, is it right for our country to be there in the first place? There's the financial perspective of our increasing national debt and how this has just continued to shovel money into that black hole, the abyss that is the defense budget. So I do see a lot of these points just very plainly out in the world every day. When you turn on the TV, when you talk to others, when you talk to veterans and their families, these are all points that almost 100% of the time jump out at you and stick with you. So now that we understand why it would be a valuable thing to get out of Afghanistan, how can we partner with Concerned Veterans for America to end our endless wars?
That's why we're here, right? What can we do? We got to raise our voice. We need to advocate. We've got to ask our fellow citizens and lawmakers, our elected officials, some rather uncomfortable and difficult questions about the situation. A couple of examples, and I've already touched on a lot of these points. If we think that our country is engaged in a war that doesn't improve our security, doesn't improve our safety here at home, doesn't make us more prosperous economically, then why are we engaged in it? We need to ask that question. Or put differently, if we put such a large investment in any engagement, we're talking about, in the case of Afghanistan, $45 billion every single year, and a staggering human cost on top of that, which we cannot forget. But we have very little to show for it after almost 20 years of investment in fighting and conflict. Then is it really in our national interest to continue down that path? Is it really good for our country? I don't think it is. Concerned Veterans for America doesn't think it is. And if you ask that question to veterans and military families around the country, the very rapidly growing answer is no. And right now, nearly 3/4 of military families support a U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. 3 out of 4 people in that community support a withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that's mirrored in the civilian population also. It's public opinion on this issue has shifted in favor of a withdrawal consistently and even recently very rapidly. So it's something that a lot of Americans also support. I just want to give you kind of some good news and bad news about the situation and thinking about how we make a difference in this. I'll give you the bad news first, right? There's a very influential group of individuals in Washington, D.C. that would love to see America continue fighting in Afghanistan and in other conflicts where we're engaged. And this is the foreign policy establishment, as it's often referred to. I'm talking about elected officials, academics, other elites in our nation's capital who drive policy, especially in the foreign policy realm. And their vision for American foreign policy is one where America's engagement with the world revolves around what they call military primacy, and leaving other instruments of power like diplomacy or trade underutilized, underleveraged. And those instruments of national power can be very influential when dealing with the world. And so this is a pretty dangerous strategy, and we're actually seeing those ramifications right now in what we've reaped from 2 decades of it. But the good news, there is good news, and that is that we're actually closer than ever to ending this war. And largely that's because the Trump administration has made it a goal of the administration to end these, as he refers to it, these endless wars that we've been fighting. And we have been seeing progress. Look back at the February agreement with the Taliban. That was monumental. That was historic. We're down to under 8,600 troops in the country now, and that's a big step forward. And dropping too. And on top of that, the administration has signaled their desire that we even accelerate the drawdown, and that's a good thing. We may actually be witnessing the end of this longest war in our history. That's a really good thing. So we're at this critical juncture, this critical moment, and if we don't see this conflict as a worthy investment of our resources, what can we do about it? This is a big policy challenge, and as luck has it, our organization is built to advocate for policy. It's in our mission statement. It's what we do. We're good at it. We love to do it, and so we're actively working on 2 main efforts here in a grassroots advocacy sense. The first one is we're educating American citizens. We've got to spread the word about this. It can be tough because the war in Afghanistan doesn't dramatically affect the lives of most Americans. Most of our neighbors just aren't directly affected by the conflict on a daily basis. The people who are feeling the brunt of this conflict are those with loved ones who are being sent into harm's way. Their families are left here to try to manage life without their service member. Those are the people who are really affected. So as veterans and military families, we've got to enlighten our fellow Americans, our fellow citizens, our neighbors, and we got to tell our stories, tell our stories of how we've been affected, the hardship that we experience in fighting these wars. We've got to share the truth about what's at stake. We've got to also ensure that the current generation of veterans, the next generation of warfighters that's going to come behind us, are again valued in our society as an important resource that our society collectively takes responsibility for and ownership for. That's really important. And I think that we've lost that. But we've got to educate people. And CVA is actively elevating this issue on a very broad scale through awareness campaigns. And we're also providing some in-depth programs for anybody that's interested in learning about what a more productive, a better U.S. foreign policy might look like. And I think David might share some of those opportunities at the end. So that's education. That's the first thing that we are actively working toward. The second is what we like to call changing political incentives. What do I mean by that, right? Well, politicians, those Congress critters, as many have called them, in Washington, D.C., they're like all rational human beings. They respond to their environment based on incentives. And in a political context, that's done when constituents and other influencers send signals to them about what we want them to do and what we don't want them to do. They're very in tune. Believe it. They're very in tune with what people want them to do and don't want them to do. They care about it. So I'm talking about good old grassroots organizing, sending letters, making phone calls, canvassing, tweeting at them. You can do this from your couch. You can tweet at your lawmakers. If you have a platform in radio or TV, calling them out on media is very effective. They care about what people think. And all of these things are levers of political incentives that we can influence through. Politicians, I think, especially listen to their constituents, because those are the people who reelect them or elect them in the first place. And so our strategy is to change these political incentives that drive different behavior in Washington, D.C. And specifically, we want our elected officials to know that if they aren't willing to go against this foreign policy establishment that is influencing way over in Washington, D.C., our foreign policy, or if they're going to work against the commander in chief who believes that it's time to bring our troops home, then those officials are going to hear from us. They're going to hear from us. And if those lawmakers don't demonstrate some courage to lead and represent the majority of Americans who've just had enough of this, then we'll find someone else who does have the courage. And that's what it looks like to change political incentives, electing principal leaders and then holding them accountable. That's what we've got to do. And, CVA doesn't do this by itself. We're really just a vehicle here. We're a vehicle through which people like you, engaged citizens, can make an impact, and a much bigger impact than any one of us can do on our own, much bigger. And that's something, if it appeals to you, we want to hear from you. And David's going to have some more info about getting more involved with our organization. But back to your question, David, what can we do about this? I want to offer this one last thing for our listeners to take advantage of if they want to. So for those of you who joined us who have been listening to me speaking, you've been nodding your head in agreement, you're with us on this. You heard this conversation, you want to do something about it maybe? You can do something right now. So I just want to invite you to visit our special campaign website for this initiative. It's called endendlesswars.com. Just go to endendlesswars.com on your computer or your smartphone. You can go there, and with a click of a button, it's very easy. You can send a letter to your representative, both of your senators, as well as the President of the United States, that asks our leaders in Washington to bring an end to this conflict in Afghanistan, bring our troops home to their families. We've already, just this year, sent hundreds of thousands of letters to the president and lawmakers. It's been just a huge response to this. Again, the website's endendlesswars.com. Check it out. It's incredibly easy. You don't have to make an appointment with your lawmaker. You don't have to speak to anybody. You don't have to call anybody up. You just enter your name and info. Take a look at the letter before you send it, and then hit send. And those messages will be automatically sent to again, your representative, your senators, and to the president. So check it out, endendlesswars.com. Look, thanks everybody again for what you've done already. Again, just participating in our End Endless Wars 5K has been a phenomenal response, and we really appreciate what you do. I hope you stay connected with us too. We want to see more of you and hear more from you. So David, I'll send it back to you.
To all of our audience members out there, please take the time to sign this petition. Please take the time to join hands with Concerned Veterans for America so that we can end our endless wars. Myself, all my brothers and sisters, every day we continue to put on the uniform. We go out there and we sacrifice. America's poor foreign policy decisions has tangible impacts, and it's usually the cost of a loved one, the cost of a limb, the cost of mental stability. War is a hellacious thing. It has a terrible impact on families. We are stuck in a political quagmire that has no tangible goals in sight. Please partner with us. Please end our endless wars. If you would like to stay connected to Concerned Veterans for America, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter at Concerned Vets. You can find us on Facebook as Concerned Veterans for America. I am David Fitzgerald with Concerned Veterans for America. Thank you for joining myself and Nate Anderson. I hope you sign the petition, endendlesswars.com, and enjoy your night, guys.